I'm not worried. Hopefully no one is looking inside my sweater. And if you are, please stop. Don't go into my bag and take my sweater out to inspect the inside. Just leave it a secret. Someone left this comment on my last video. Mark, is that a new field cardigan? Why, yes it is. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about it. This is the field cardigan from Camilla Vad. I previously made the field sweater, the pullover version, and after working that stitch and feeling like I understood everything the pattern had to offer or throw at me, I thought, let me go ahead and crank out the cardigan as well. So in this video, I'm going to be taking you through my complete finishing process. This includes steeking the sweater. That's not something called for in the pattern, but an adaptation I made. So we'll steek, we'll reinforce with a sewing machine, cut the sweater open, and we'll go through some trial and error with button bands that work for this sweater. So if you're interested in learning more about this project or spending a little time with me, stick around and let's get into it. When I sit down to film different parts of my crafting process, I never know exactly how best to do it. Sometimes I feel like it makes sense to sit down and cast on, pick out the yarn, wind the yarn with you, but then that process gets really slow, and I end up with a lot of footage that's pretty boring or just not really ideal. It's not that pleasing to watch or listen to. So typically I come to you with completed garments, and then I talk about things that I did along the way. So I'm trying to sit down and be consistent with showing you some of those adaptations or some of the hurdles I reach in each project. So today that includes steeking this garment and figuring out what kind of button band, what structurally will work, and also what I was happy with the look of to finish this project. So I have various bits of footage, several days worth, where I'm sitting down and attempting to make progress with this sweater. So let me start at the beginning. In late August or September of 2023, I started working on the field sweater. At that time, Camilla Vad's field sweater was on the homepage of Ravelry. It was the first thing you would see every time you opened the website on your phone or your computer. And so it was there, it was in your face, and it was beautiful. And there were two versions of it. One done out of a single color, and then the other option was to hold a runner, a mohair, sort of a thread or lace weight fiber for the yoke, for these grain stitches, as the designer calls them. So I took that approach, and you've seen this sweater before. It's probably my favorite sweater. A lot of people give me compliments on this sweater. I think it's beautiful. It's detailed while still being balanced and something I can wear every day. And I think for me, it's flattering. I'm always happy wearing it. It's comfortable. The process of making it was a little more involved. There are definitely some issues in the pattern. There are some translation things that haven't all been caught and corrected, and some of the descriptions of stitches or process are a little bit complicated to read. So a lot of people took to the internet to make tutorials to walk through and answer questions for how the pattern goes from paper to your hands and becomes actual tangible fabric. So that's what I did as well. On the channel, one of my first videos that I ever posted was a field sweater tutorial where I break down the stitch and I show how I do it with a cable needle, and also my preferred way, without a cable needle. So you may have seen these things before. If you've been on the channel, you've probably seen the sweater. You may have watched that tutorial. It might have been the first thing you found from me on YouTube. So all of that to say, once I had finished the pullover version, I was happy with it, and I think right after that, Camilla Vad released the cardigan version, and I thought, let me go for it. I understand how to do that grain stitch. I just done the sweater, so everything else was going to be similar, except this time we'll have an opening at the front to make this garment a cardigan. And it was at this point that I made my first alteration or adaptation of the pattern. If you know me, you'll know that I like to work in the round. If it's possible for me to work a garment on circular needles always working the right side, making a complete tube of fabric, that's my choice. And I know how to purl. I promise I can do it. I don't mind purling. I love working textured patterns, but if I'm doing color work or if I'm doing cables and it's an entire garment, I prefer to have it be as seamless as possible. I like to just work the whole thing, work the right side of the fabric. It's much easier for me to memorize the pattern that way, and then I can do it on the road. I can do it as I travel. I can do it in rehearsal, before or after concerts, when I'm sort of sitting around in those call times. So for me, for my brain, for my hands, for my lifestyle, it works out. So once I downloaded the Field Cardigan pattern, obviously, as most cardigans are made, you're not making a complete tube of fabric. Some you do, some are instructed to be steeked, but several you're working either panels, you have 2 front panels, 1 back panel, or you're just working from one edge all the way around the back to the other edge, and then you turn the work and reverse, which makes sense. It gives you a nice finished edge. It gives your project more stability in some cases, but my whole plan of working the Field Cardigan was that I had just done the Field Sweater. So I was only used to doing those stitches on the right side, on the front side of the work. So I thought, well, I don't want to reverse these stitches because I already have everything memorized. I just want to work the right side. So I had recently finished my first steeked sweater, which was the Maya cardigan, and I have some pictures of it here. Really fun project to make, color work, and because it's color work, the designer instructed for it to be made in the round with a separate channel of steek stitches. So when a designer specifies that you should steek something, typically they give you a stitch count to add and you mark it off with stitch markers. Whatever you're doing between those markers is up to you. If it's color work, you can do a sort of columned every other stitch color work, or you can do like a crosshatch, so it looks more like a checkerboard, something so that you're securing both strands, both colors or several colors in that steek when it comes time to reinforce it, cut it, and pick up that edge for a button band, a sleeve, whatever you're doing to finish it. So typically it's up to you. You have some freedom. And if the designer says put 3 stitches aside for a steek, you may not be comfortable with 3 stitches. You may want 5 stitches or 7 stitches to give you a little more fabric to play around with when it comes time to reinforce and cut it open, because I know it can be scary cutting your fabric. So let's go ahead and hop to the footage of me showing you that steek for the Field Cardigan and talking about how I'll reinforce that, and then actually doing the process, reinforcing and cutting it open. And be warned, there's some trial and error here, but I'm happy to take you along in case you want to learn from my errors or in case you want the company. I get the question pretty regularly from people who also want to work the right side of a project. They want to work in the round. They want to make something that will eventually be flat, like a cardigan, have the opening. They want to adapt it and make it in the round. So let's talk about what we need to do to get that pattern in the round. The first thing we'll do is add a panel of steek stitches. So as I worked this sweater, and I'll zoom in here, as I worked this sweater top down, I left a gap, I left a break in the work for 7 stitches. You'll see here the grain motifs, and on the other side the grain, but in the middle, just a bit of stockinette stitch. And the grains travel all the way around the rest of the sweater. So this is my steek panel. As I set up the sweater, I put a stitch marker at one edge, cast on 7 stitches, and added another stitch marker to show the boundaries of that steek panel. And what it means, and what it does for us, is that we will use this panel of 7 stitches from the top of the sweater all the way down to reinforce the material and then cut approximately down the center to then open this piece of fabric. And with steeking, you can apply the technique to anything. A lot of people steek with sticky non-superwash wool, Shetland wool, any non-superwash that they use for color work, so that you can work color work in the round on the right side. Then at the end, you will just cut the gaps open. You'll cut the armhole openings, the V-neck, the cardigan front, whatever you need for your finished garment. And with wool like that, that really clings to itself, you don't have to do anything. You can just cut. It's going to cling well enough. You pick up the stitches for your button band, your sleeve, your finishing, and then over time, those edges will felt. For something superwash, for something acrylic, something cotton, something slippery, we have to reinforce in a different way. So we have a few options. The option that I'll demonstrate today works for anything. If you're working with a sticky wool and it's your first time steeking and you're not comfortable just cutting the fabric and you want to reinforce, you can use this method. If you're working with acrylic or cotton, something that won't felt no matter how much you will it to felt, you can use this method. So today we're going to go in working with this fairly slick alpaca with our sewing machine. So we'll essentially sew a channel on each side of the steek, and I'll use a stretch stitch. If you don't have a stretch stitch on your machine, you could use a zigzag stitch. You want something so that the fabric can still retain that flexibility that we get with knitting. So let's break out the sewing machine, let's reinforce our steek, and then we're going to cut it open together. If you're attempting to steek something that is unfeltable, like acrylic, cotton, anything slick, you can reinforce without a sewing machine. You can go in and crochet a reinforcement. You could also go in and sew by hand a reinforcement. So this is just a quick option, something that I like to do because I do have my sewing machine handy, and I'll link some other videos for the other types of reinforcement. And we're not going to get totally into the depths of steeking today, but this is just one example. And for me, someone who likes to work the right side of my garments, I like to work in the round. It goes faster for me. It works better for my brain. I love the world of steeking. I love the option to adapt my patterns this way. So I'm taking you along for the ride. If I were more organized, a little bit more patient, I would be using a thread that matches my fabric, but I'm not. And everything we sew, everything we reinforce is going to be on the inside of the cardigan. So the only person who would see it is you or somebody else who's turning your cardigan inside out. So for me, I'm okay having a contrasting thread, but this would be a good step to take if you're interested in having everything be a little bit more finished. Once I've cut my cardigan open, I will use the column of stitches closest to the pattern on each side to pick up my button band. So I don't want to sew in that area, but I'm going to sew in maybe 1 or 2 columns over from that. All right, that was stressful. So I sat down at my sewing machine thinking, I know exactly what to do. I've done this before. And I used my stretch stitch, which did not actually give me that much stretch with the garment. As a knitter, you know how much stretch knitted fabric has. It's incredible. Width, lengthwise, your fabric has a lot of flexibility. So I tried my stitch, I gave the garment a tug and realized the stitch was way too limiting. It was scrunching it up. And I know that as I wear this, as I continue to reblock it in future seasons, I'll want my fabric to have the ability to stretch. And I don't want the cut side or the button band to lock it in place to certain dimensions. So all of that led me to this incredibly helpful video. So I recommend, if you're new to sewing your knits or sewing crocheted fabric, for steeking, for seaming, for anything you're doing with your handcrafts, go watch this video. It was helpful. So then I landed on a triple stitch after the great guidance in this video, and it gave me, I think, an appropriate amount of stretch. So I'm happy now with the amount of stretch that I have here, and I'm ready to cut this sweater open. So let's cut it open. I'm going to use a small pair of scissors. I always think it would look better, it would look more dramatic if I used a big pair of scissors, so maybe I will one day. Anytime you're going to cut your knit fabric open, make sure that you're cutting only the layer you intend to cut. So I've got 2 layers of fabric here. I'm going to lift up the top layer, give myself a little bit of separation as I cut so that I know I'm cutting the right thing. And you can see here before we cut, I have 2 channels of sewn stitches, and because I used a contrasting thread, it's easy for me to see. So I'm just going to cut right between those. And that's it. We're just cutting up our beautiful sweater. If I flip it over and zoom in, you'll see that because we used the sewing machine, all of these stitches are safe. They're not going anywhere. They can't get past that sewn line. Now I've got a cardigan. Almost. So at this point, I need to pick up a button band. I need to go into the specific column of stitches that I planned out, that I targeted in my steek section, and I will pick up some sort of button band. I could do just a traditional button band, sort of on its side, ribbed, or I might do something where I have a vertical running button band. So I'm going to do a little bit of research of my own. I'm going to dig around on YouTube and see what I think would look nicest and what would behave best for this type of sweater. I'm off to look for that stuff, and when I come back, hopefully we'll be working with our button band. Again, a huge thank you to Sarah of Sewing Parts Online for the incredibly helpful advice and just the clear, concise delivery of all the different options for working with knitted fabric if you have sort of a standard sewing machine. So that was a lifesaver as I was stuck working stitch after stitch that just wasn't giving me enough reinforcement and elasticity. So 10 out of 10, recommend that video if you're someone who's new with working with knitted fabrics on your sewing machine. It saved me, I guess, the complete error of ruining this piece of fabric, which is always the biggest fear. If you're taking something that you've hand knit or hand crocheted to the sewing machine, if it gets eaten by the sewing machine, I mean, there are just so many things that could go wrong. So I know several of you have given me advice before about how to get that fabric moving, what kind of foot to use on the machine, putting tissue paper underneath. So thank you. Thanks for saving me a lot of heartache with a potentially ruined garment. So now that we have things steeked, it's time to finish the sweater with a button band. And this is one of the biggest drawbacks, I guess, of adapting the pattern. What I should have done is worked the button band I wanted as I was making the sweater, and then steeked it and just tucked back and secured, maybe tacked down that steeked edge. But at the time of starting this sweater, I wasn't that experienced. I had only made myself a few sweaters. This was still sort of an advanced beginner or intermediate project in my sweater journey and in my finishing journey. So I was just thinking I would put on a horizontal button band, a typical ribbed button band where I would pick up maybe 3 out of 4 stitches along the fabric, do the button band, add the holes, put on some buttons, and I would be done. But because this is alpaca, it's pretty drapey, there's not much structure to it, and I was just worried that having that horizontal button band would flap around, it would flop open on its own, and I didn't want to see the exposed inside of my sweater. I want it to sit in mostly one place when it's not buttoned, when I just want to wear it open. So this is where I had more trial and error to figure out what sort of button band would work. And this is when Kate, one of my viewers, one of my community members, one of my friends here, who is doing the sea glass make along with me, she had said in a Zoom session that morning that she might do a vertical double knit button band to finish her sea glass project. And I thought that's a great idea. So thank you, Kate. Thank you for putting me on that path and letting me borrow that idea to finish this field cardigan. So off to YouTube I went, looking for instructions of how to do that technique. I'd never done it before, and to see if it would work for this sweater. So here we go with a bit of that process. All right, we're back for a button band check-in. So in this process, I ended up finding a very helpful video, and I think this was the video that Kate recommended in the Zoom session, and that is a double knitted edge button band tutorial by Handmade by Florence. That's the YouTube account. So again, this video was very helpful in concisely explaining how the technique works, how to get started, picking up your stitches, casting on what you need, and what to do to work this button band for whatever garment you want to add it to. And in that video, Florence talks about measuring the gauge of your project and also measuring the gauge of your button band, making sure that they work out so that however many stitches you pick up for that button band, it's going to work out harmoniously with the project, with the sweater that you're adding it to. And I did that, but in the alpaca I have the weight of that button band. Even though lengthwise it worked out, it was too heavy and it caused the cardigan to really bow outwards. And you'll see that in some of these clips. I thought it was great. I kept giving the fabric a stretch, thinking as I wear it, as I continue to block it in future seasons, the amount of give that the button band has was matching the sweater, and they look like they lined up. I didn't want a button band that was going to scrunch up the sweater, but I also didn't want a button band that was too long. And it wasn't until I tried it on after doing one side of it that I realized this isn't going to work. It's way off. And I wasn't even going to try it on. I just thought by looking at it, by laying it down, it looked good. I'm so grateful that for whatever reason I thought put it on because it wasn't working out. And it probably took me 6 hours to do one button band because it was a new technique. I had a lot of stitches picked up. It was time consuming. So after 6 hours, after doing it across an entire Sunday, I was ready to pick up the other side, add the button holes, and again, I'm glad I tried it on, because if I didn't, I would have done the second button band and the whole thing would have been really lousy and I would have spent 12 hours. So I caught it in time. I pulled that button band back and I did the same technique, the same vertical double knit button band, because I like the weight of it. I think it's a good finished look, but I picked up fewer stitches. So I ended up picking 3 out of 4 stitches, which is what I would normally do when picking up, even though the gauge matched and it looked like I should have been picking up stitch for stitch. So anyway, again, a misstep, an error, but we fixed it. So I was able to add the buttonholes on the second button band and then go in and add my buttons to finish the cardigan. Now, before I do the final reveal showing off the cardigan, I want to talk about the buttons that I hope to have on this cardigan one day. And these are some really precious buttons. They're cat buttons that I saw on the Yarn Discovery Tour, the yarn crawl that takes place in northeastern Ohio, when I was at Cast On Yarn Studio in Vermilion. And I reached out to Brenda, the owner there, and right now those buttons are, I think, on back order. They're not available from Katrinkles, so I'm waiting. If I get my hands on those buttons one day, I'll probably switch them out. So right now I have a simple sort of dark brown stained wooden button on the cardigan because it works. It's the same size as the cat buttons I hope to use, but look at these buttons, and I know they'll kind of blend in with the sweater, but I just think they're adorable, and I would use some sort of contrasting yarn for the bow tie to put these on the sweater. So we did it. We've got a finished sweater. It's only my third cardigan, so I'm glad to have something else with this structure, with this form that I can throw on and enjoy in the autumn, in the winter, and maybe even in the spring. So I show a little bit of what the garment looks like before I blocked it, and I'm a big believer in blocking everything. I'll also put some of this footage in a blocking video that's coming maybe in the next month or 2 months on the channel, where I'm trying to show you several different garments, different weights of yarn, different textures of stitch, different stitch combinations, and how drastic some of them look, the drastic difference before blocking and after blocking. Let's look at it. So side by side, you've got me with the pre-blocked sweater and then me with the blocked sweater. And the biggest difference that I always notice with blocking is the fit and the size of the sweater. Typically, I get a little more width, a little more length in the garment. Sleeves fit better after blocking. And if it's a superwash yarn, or in this case, this alpaca, it grew quite a bit. I got a generous amount of length, width, and sort of sleeve volume, which is what I was going for. I didn't make it quite as long as I wanted or quite as big as I wanted because I knew in the blocking process and as I wear it, it'll grow a little. I'll get a lot of drape from this. The other thing I was hoping for in the blocking is that the blocking process would help alleviate some of my irregularity in stitches in my knitting. I worked on this sweater for a pretty long period, almost a year. I started it last winter and finished most of the body, but then, I don't know, for whatever reason, I was distracted by other projects I had, so I put it away. And I didn't pick it up until this fall, when I purposefully went through and tried to start finishing as many projects as I could, sort of putting them into the queue of current projects, things I was excited about, and then trying to be good about finishing things. And in this case, all the sweater needed was a couple more inches on the body, and then sleeves and a button band. So most of the sweater, maybe 3/4 of the sweater, was finished, and it was nice to be able to just cap it off with what felt like a brief knitting commitment. So because I put this down and picked it up over such a long time span, my knitting looks pretty different. My tension is a little bit different between the two periods that I was focusing on it, and because it's alpaca, because it's so silky, it's so soft, it doesn't hold itself up in the way that wool would. It just really drapes, it really flops. My stitches look kind of ragged, they look scary in some places, and I think that we worked a lot of that out with the blocking. So again, in this footage you'll see some of the before spots, some of the rougher places, the rougher transitions that I'm very happy to say did block out. All right, I always wish I could make myself shorter for this part, because if I actually stand up, you lose my head. Anyway, let me try to stand like a horse or something. So I'm happy with this. I think this is a beautiful sweater. It looks very finished. You'll see the sleeves have sort of enough space in my definition. I always do a fairly short sleeve. I know some people don't like it. I'm sorry. I like this. It's very drapey, but I think it's a decent fit. I get a little bit of sort of smiling on the button band, which I'm just not going to worry about. I think it would drive me crazy if I focus on it. But anyway, let me give you a turn. Let me show you this whole finished blocked sweater. And here it is open. I think this works as well. It does sort of hold itself in place. It's not going to flop open too easily with that double knit button band. It sort of stays on the right side. I think that if I had used the ribbed horizontal button band, it would almost just lay open on its own, which is not what I wanted. So I'm happy with this. My stitches still look a little spooky, but I think for the most part it's really evened out with the blocking. I'm a big fan of the grain stitch out of one color. I think it's exceptionally beautiful in my sweater where I hold the mohair, but I think it looks really beautiful, simple in this setting. The section where I had initially added length, I think blocked out superbly. You don't see one defining line of difference. There are some lines we get where the color has a little bit of variation, but I like that. I like when things are heathered or have natural variation. And I think this button band is beautiful. It's a beautiful finish. And I haven't done anything to my steek. I've just got a ragged, spooky steek on the inside, but I'm not worried. Hopefully no one is looking inside my sweater. And if you are, please stop. Don't go into my bag and take my sweater out to inspect the inside. Just leave it a secret. Okay, I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. I did put this project up on Ravelry. I'm trying to be really good, or at least be better, about posting my projects, posting the yarn I used and adding notes. If I changed something, if something was not as I thought it would be, if I was deceived by something or found a real challenge, I'm making sure to put those notes down so that other people can glance at my projects and hopefully it will help them have a better experience if they decide to make the same pattern. So go check out the project page if you want to learn more about the sweater. I did put in the notes some of the things that I didn't love about it, the changes I made, and I put the kind of yarn I used, all of those details. So that's that. As always, thank you for choosing to spend some time with me here on the channel. I love to hear what you're making, so let me know on Instagram, let me know on Ravelry, feel free to add me as a friend there or send me a message. Of course, you can leave information in the comments below these videos. I think the comment sections that I have here on YouTube are some of the nicest comment sections I've ever seen. There are great, wonderful people who are willing to share a little bit about themselves, build other people up, connect with each other, and just share knowledge, recommendations, and insight in the kindest way possible. So thank you for being a kind person. Thank you for opening yourself up to be part of this community. It's so healing for me. It's such a happy place, and I can't tell you how good it makes me feel that really wonderful people are choosing to spend their time with me. So thank you. Thanks for being here. If you're not subscribed already, I would appreciate it. If you have friends who like to craft or crafting groups you belong to, maybe you'll share my channel with them. I appreciate anything you do to help further what's going on here. As always, happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy crafting to you, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.